I'd like to do an overview of the reason why you're learning these different cost classifications. I think it's helpful to understand the why or the purpose rather than just blindly memorizing what's considered, say, a product cost versus a period cost. The different cost classifications, some of these we've already gone through and others we'll learn in this module, but starting with the first one in this chart that's in your module. Module 4, we went through the difference between product costs and period costs, and that separation of costs was important because we needed to determine how much is inventory on your balance sheet versus how much should we expense on the income statement. We'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. We've already discussed the splitting of costs between direct costs and indirect costs. The importance for that is that we need to be able to ascertain or estimate what a cost object's cost is. To do that requires allocating the indirect costs, the costs that aren't easily traced to any particular cost object. So that's important for pricing decisions or determining whether you want to continue making a product or providing a service or keeping a department. In Module 6, we talked about controllable versus non-controllable. That's a necessary classifying of costs because you don't want to evaluate management on costs they had no say in. So when you're doing performance evaluations, you want to make sure you're only evaluating the employee based on what they could control. In modules 5 and 6, we split out costs between variable and fixed. That's extremely useful for trying to do analyses of varying volumes. In other words, you can see what should we, or if we think we can sell, say, 10,000 units, what would our operating income be? Or what if we were to eliminate some variable costs by automating and increasing our fixed costs? So we did that we did a fair amount of that in modules 5 and 6. We're also going to continue to do so here in module 7. Lastly is the relevant costs versus irrelevant costs. Personally, I find irrelevant costs, which are considered sunk costs, hard to, it's not as intuitive, but we'll get some practice because the idea is that when you're faced with a decision, you only want to consider the costs that will change going into the future. You don't want to be taking into account costs that have already occurred and that will not change regardless of the alternative you choose. So we'll continue on with going through each of these separately with the exception of controllable versus non-controllable.